Listen, how can we create a connection between the audience and our main characters in the first chapter? It's important, and let's use webtoons as case studies to figure out the strategies on this episode of the StoryPod podcast. Come on in, bestie. Welcome to StoryPod, where we do the doing of story development together. Brought to you by Creative BFF. Let's get into it. Listen, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm coming before you giving pirate tease a little bit, but listen, we tried different things on this channel, okay? Anyway, how are you? Hope you're well. My name is Ashley. I will be your intrepid guide on this journey, trying to figure out how can we immediately create, or almost immediately, create a connection, an interest in the audience for our main characters. Before we get started, I already told you my name. My name is Ashley. If you have any story questions or if you would like help with your story, you can reach me at ash@creativebff.com. That's my email. Or you can go to my website, creativebff.com. You can leave me a message in the contact section. Please put in the subject line that you have a story question. Otherwise, it will be going in the never to be answered pile, because you know we get all of this spam, girl. So here is what I'm thinking. I know that there are probably, so many writings and books and things on this subject, but I'm someone who learns something the best when I actually do it. I have to do it. It helps me. So what I decided to do when I was trying to figure out for the War of the Worlds episode of this podcast, why did I not connect with the main characters? And that sent me on this journey of, well, how does one create connection with the main characters? And what I started to do was analyze webtoons that I am absolutely hooked on, that have me in a chokehold right now. I have recently gotten back into reading webtoons, and rather than trying to go and look for the answer that somebody else gave, I wanted to identify how these writers are creating connection between me as their audience and their main character. For myself, I just wanted to analyze it for myself. What has been effective in getting me hooked on the sauce that they are serving in their webtoons? And so I identified 3 general areas that I have seen in the webtoons that I read. I'm sure that there are probably more. And in fact, if you know of more, please definitely put it in the comments below. I would be very interested to hear. It can't hurt to have more tools in the belt. You know what I'm saying? But these are just the ones that I have seen in the webtoons that I'm reading. And what we're going to do is I'm going to go over these 3 things that I identified, and then I am going to give some examples from webtoons, the aforementioned webtoons that absolutely have me in a chokehold right now. As always, well, not as always, but for today, I do have notes. So if I avert my eyes, if I take my eyes off of your beautiful face, please give me grace. Okay, listen, none of us are perfect, okay? So let's get into it. So the first area that I identified that just really came up in my mind first was this idea of creating an emotional reaction in the audience through the circumstances that the character is experiencing. And for me, when I was thinking, okay, what types of emotional responses are these? A lot of them were generally sort of negative responses, in the sense that, me as the audience member, I'm feeling the injustice of their situation. Perhaps I am sad, as sad as one can be reading a fake story. But I'm sad about what the character is experiencing, and seeing this starting place of injustice, perhaps, or having a feeling of, I want to see how the character is going to right the wrongs that they are experiencing at the hands of other characters, or just how are they going to overcome, the circumstances that they're in. And so it's creating this emotion in me that I need to have resolved, and the only way for it to be resolved is for me to see the character through the story. So I'm calling that kind of like emotional. That's the first category, emotion. I'm sure that there are positive ones as well, but I feel like, and there's probably some kind of human psychology element to this, that giving the audience a negative response to the circumstance that the character is in that perhaps would create some kind of sympathy or empathy. I never know which one is which when I'm using that word, or even some sort of what is the word? A connection born out of this situation, or aspects of this negative situation are familiar to me and what I've experienced, me being the audience member who's reading, obviously, not necessarily me specifically. And I want to see how they are going to handle this familiar experience. So that could be something like bullying in high school. It could be something like experiencing infidelity and general cruelty or negligence or something in a romantic relationship, or just seeing somebody be done wrong overall, those kinds of things. And those are things that are generally kind of universal. We can all relate to them on some aspect. If we haven't experienced it, someone we know and love probably has experienced it. So that's getting us immediately kind of connected to what's happening in the story, and then also generally firmly putting us on the side of the protagonist as the hero that we're following and we want to see, and live vicariously through the expectation of successful, vengeance, successful vindication that this character will experience. Because in real life, you don't always get the catharsis of, I was vindicated for this thing that I experienced, especially if the emotional connection is based on the situation that the character is experiencing is something familiar to us in our lives. So we don't always get to have that relief of vindication or justice being served. And so seeing it happen and being able to kind of live vicariously through a character who we expect is going to get that result that we didn't get immediately can cause us to connect and dig in, make an emotional connection to what the character is going to experience based on what they have already been experiencing. So number 2 is something that I'm calling like Goodwill. And what I have identified this as, and there's probably like legitimate scholastic scholarly terms for these things, but Goodwill, I find, is created in the audience towards the characters because the characters maybe have traits and personality, aspects of their personality that we find admirable or attractive, that we enjoy, that we want to see, perhaps that we relate to or that we wish that we were, and or skills and talents that are interesting and extreme. Maybe they have magical powers that are super cool, or maybe they're like, the Prince of Tennis, or whatever, or they're a genius. But I find when you're going the route of this person has a really, really cool talent or skill that sets them apart, that the story is kind of going to at least somewhat revolve around, usually what I see and what I think is probably the most effective is to combine it with some personality traits, some character traits that are admirable, that we like, that will kind of strengthen our interest in the fact that they are the number one most powerful mage in the kingdom, but also they are, typically like, oh, a really good person. They have great, a great sense of morality and honor, or they are kind and gentle, or whatever combination of traits you may want to get. That doesn't mean that the character is perfect necessarily. And you kind of don't want them to be perfect. You want them to have generally a character arc that the audience can follow. You want them to have growth happening. So you want to give them, yes, they have their strengths, but you want to also make sure they have weaknesses that will cause problems for them in whatever way your story needs, right? So that is what I think, creating goodwill. It's like, oh, I like this character. I like this character's determination to succeed in the face of these circumstances. So, side note, often I've seen all of these things, all of these three things that I'm going to go over, that I am going over, combined in a chapter one. And sometimes it's just one or two, whatever works for your story, right? So yeah, goodwill. We're interested because we like the character for some reason. They're interesting to us for some reason. And or they have a great skill that is cool, basically. And so the third one that we're going to talk about, that I identified, was basically the journey that is being presented is one that your particular audience is going to be interested in. So there's a genre of webtoon that I discovered I would say fairly recently, probably within the last year and a half, that has absolutely, literally body slammed me against the wall, has me in a chokehold. Okay. All of these things have me in a chokehold. And it is this isekai, or, going back in time to redo. I don't know what that genre is called. They're kind of slightly separate. Isekai is like being someone from our world basically being put into the world of a fantasy novel-y game type of romance, whatever type of some kind of fictional. And it doesn't necessarily have to be fictional, I would imagine, but oftentimes they're put in a fictional world that they consumed in some fashion in their normal, our world type of life. And they usually die courtesy of Truck-kun, if you're familiar with that trope, or in some way. And then they're put into this fantasy world of some sort. Or it doesn't have to be. The other genre that I don't know the name of is basically going back in time. They die some kind of horrible or unjust death or something like that. And then they are sent back to a time before that happened, but retaining the knowledge of everything that happened in the years in their past, the past run at this life, their past go at this life, from the point that they're sent back to the point that they die. So they have an opportunity to change things in some way. Those are I don't know, that's an interesting setup. And basically you kind of generally know there's a lot of sameness, which, a lot of genres, the genres have their tropes and their cliches, right? But for whatever reason, the tropes and cliches of those particular genres work for me. It's like, I know what the setup is going to be, but I'm still immediately here for the ride, unless I don't like the characters or whatever. But generally, I'm in a little bit if that's the setup. So presenting a journey that's interesting, or even something like a, if this is your jam, like a high school romance between two introverts who are, likable though, but people don't really see them. And, that can appeal to the introvert side of us, of those of us who would be interested in that. I used to be an introvert, kind of still am, but, or I would say I used to be very shy and not confident. So there can be an appeal for me to see characters who exhibit some of the traits that I used to have that made it hard for me perhaps to have certain things that I wanted at that time in high school, whatever. And it might be fun to see how characters that exhibit those traits find one another and fall in love and things like that. And any number of interesting setups that whatever audience you have will find interesting. It's like we're here for the journey. Perhaps in the first chapter, we haven't yet necessarily seen something happen that causes a real emotional response in the audience member, or perhaps they have not yet displayed what traits and skills they will have or will be revealed later on as we move through the story. But the setup of the story, the promise of the premise, would that be applicable here? I don't know. Is enough for me to want to move, or for the audience to want to move through the chapters just to kind of see how is this author going to handle it. So those are my 3 areas that I identified. As I said, there's probably more. If you have some other ones, please definitely leave them in the comments below. Let's help each other in our little small community of writers, you know, whatever that may be, whatever that looks like, so that we can all get better at writing. So moving right along to the example webtoons, what I did was as I mentioned, chose a selection. I think I'm going to do like 5 of them, I think. And that captured me immediately in the first chapter. And I just looked at the first chapter. I might be 50 chapters, 100 chapters into the story, but I was like, let me go back and see what was it about this first chapter that got me. So let's get right into it. So the first one that I'm going to talk about, and I wrote down the full names. I want to make sure that I'm saying the full names. It is, and forgive my pronunciation, The Bangri Clan's Unwanted Granddaughter. You can find this on Tapas. It's really good. I'm enjoying it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically tell you what happens in the first chapter. Generally, it's obviously not going to be super spoilery because it's only the first chapter. So in the first chapter of this webcomic, we see that a minor, weak villainess dies and is sent back to relive her life starting from 6 years old. So that is kind of pulling on the journey aspect. Like, that's okay. I'm interested. Let's see what she's going to do with this second chance. We are given a bit of her backstory, just enough to understand why she became a minor villain after the death of her father. And that's giving us like a little bit of an emotional connection, because we're like, okay, there seem to have been some injustices a little bit there. So I'm like, okay, let's see. Okay, I'm in. And I think, I can't remember, I don't think I put it in my notes, but I do think that this is also, let me see my other notes. I do think that this is also potentially an isekai. You know, I'm not sure. I don't think it is. I think this might be a pure, well, since it's talking about being, anyway, it doesn't matter. It might be an isekai, or it might be a pure reincarnation type of story. Anyway, so then moving on through the chapter, after she has been sent back into her 6-year-old self at a very pivotal time in her 6-year-old life, which is something that another thing that caused her to go down this path of the villainess. She has a touching moment with her father, basically, which turned the understanding as an audience member of why she was, I was like, okay, I understand why she would become a minor villainess in the circumstances of her life. But now seeing her very touching moment with her father immediately turned it into goodwill. She's not all bad. She loves her father and her father loves her. And it was a touching moment because, you know, I love a good relationship between a parent and a child. And now I want to see what happens in subsequent chapters. Now I'm connected to this character and I'm like, all right, I'm rooting for her to change her father's fate, to change her fate, you know, and not die the way that she did before. And now I'm in. And I'm ready for the party, girl. Take me on this journey. Okay. So the next comic that I'm going to use as an example for this is called Master Villainess, the Invincible, also on Tapas. Really good. A really good one. Okay, anyway, so basically what we see, this is one of those isekais, and it's really like a journey setup for interest. We see a failed romance author in our world. She dies. I think it's another Truck-kun attack. Truck-kun is like a it's like a serial killer, okay? And she is transported into the body of the villainess of the martial arts novel that she was reading, or that she had basically studied at the time, was studying at the time of her death, because she was thinking about transitioning from a romance author that wasn't really doing much for her career to going to the martial arts genre, which was more popular in the setup of this world. So she was studying and analyzing the plot line of this book. And so it's convenient, obviously she's going to have knowledge. So that in itself, like, okay, she was really studying this. And so she's going to have a lot of knowledge that's going to serve her well in this world that she's going in. So that's interesting. It's like, okay, I love that she had, and that could low key side note also kind of fall into the Goodwill area, in the sense of having something extra, an extra talent, skill, knowledge, we'll add that in there. That's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. How is she going to manipulate the situation? Obviously we're going to be knowing that she's going to be becoming the hero, even though she's being set up as the villain, and seeing how she uses that boon of knowledge is going to be interesting. It's interesting to me. I want to see it. So she decides she has to use, obviously, like I just said, use the knowledge of the novel to change the fate of the villainess and herself, which obviously, as these usually are, if you're getting thrown into a villainess, is to die in some kind of horrible way, be evil and die. And she enters the story at a really terrible moment for the villainess as well. And so we want to see how she's going to overcome these circumstances. So I'm interested in the journey that we're going to be going on, right? So the next comic that I used, which also had me in a chokehold, is the Remarried Empress, which you can find on Webtoon. And basically what we see, this is like an emotional / journey. We see a quick setup of a really elegant, beautiful empress being publicly divorced by her husband, who is with his mistress at the divorce. And so immediately we're like, no, he did it, girl. No, he did it. Immediately we're on your side. Okay, we're on your side. And then she immediately, in the first panels, turns the table on the emperor, her husband, whatever, by saying she wants permission to remarry somebody else immediately. And we get to see the shocked faces. And it's like, yes, delicious. Delicious. I'm here for it. I want to see. I can't wait to get to this point in the story. Okay, how do we get here? So immediately that journey, that section is connecting me into the journey, and it's also giving me a feeling of I'm connecting to the injustice. Okay, the injustice that this empress has experienced. Okay, then we go back a few months in time prior to that little setup of the divorce hearing, right? And we see that she is well liked by her attendants, and that her husband brought a beautiful mystery woman to the palace. And the fact that her attendants, her ladies in waiting, basically really like her, and they seem to be comfortable with her, even though she is the empress, that automatically is adding some brownie points in the mind of the audience member towards this empress who we just saw being done wrong. And then we also see, okay, she's probably a good person. It's very light, it's not anything like we saw her pulling a cat out of a tree or whatever, but it's like the fact that her ladies in waiting, and we can assume that those who serve her like her and are comfortable with her and respect her, automatically makes us think she's probably a good person, and so it was not fair what happened to her. Okay, so that is how in the first chapter of this comic immediately we're in. Okay, journey / like goodwill-y, emotional, a little bit of all of them right in that one. So the next one is a more recent comic that I recently found and started reading, and it's called A Taisho Era Student Who Is a Devoted Husband. And this is a really goodwill type of first part of the first chapter. Like in the first chapter of this, because it's like an actual manga, which is not on either one of those, so you'll have to find it elsewhere. But the first part of the first chapter is definitely like a goodwill type of thing. So what we have is Fuki, who is the main character, one of the main characters. Obviously, it's a romance. She is a cheerful, hardworking maid. She's resourceful. She's kind. She's well liked by her fellow maids and the family that she serves. We see her taking on extra work to supplement her income, regularly working after the other maids are asleep. We also see that when she was a child, 12 years old, she was well loved by the young son of the house, who was 6 years her junior. And we also see, and this part is a little bit of the emotional category. We see that she was supposed to get married at 19. And then her father passes away suddenly, leaving a bunch of unexpected debt. And because of this, the fiance breaks off the engagement to her. So yeah, couple of gut punches really close together. And what we see is that even though the family that she serves offers to help her kind of get out of the situation a little bit, offers to help her ease the burden of the debt, she basically says, no, I'm going to pay it off myself. Please just allow me to continue working here. So immediately it's like, we love her. Okay. We love this resourceful queen who has a good heart. She's hardworking. She has all of these traits that are really, really endearing, and that really cause us, even though, I feel like in this one, the primary way that we are attached to this character is through the goodwill of her positive character traits. Hardworking, kind, resourceful. We like to see this. I like to see it. I am the audience, right? So I want to see her win, right? And then adding to that, the emotional side of this journey, where she had some hard knocks hit her, some disappointments, some pain, and she was a burden was put on her that was unexpected. But rather than crumbling, we know she's gonna rise, okay? Because she's that girl, okay? So I'm into it. I want to see how this story is gonna go for her, and will she, how she's gonna succeed. And of course, you can guess that I'm not spoiling because it's in the title, basically, that this son of the family, they get married. So, and then it's like the journey of their married life. So there's that one. And then the last one, which is another really, really recent one that captured me, that I added to this list because I started reading it as I was pondering this video. And I was like, ooh, you got me, is Mom, I'm Sorry, which I believe is on Webtoon. Let me make sure. I'm pretty sure it's on Webtoon. If not, it's on Tapas. Those are the two places that I go to find it, but I'm pretty sure, I think it's on Webtoon. Really, really good so far. So basically what we see, this is like an emotional and a journey. So we see that a lot of these kind of combine multiple of these categories of how we're getting attached to this character. So we see the main character is shocked to find out that his mother is dying. He's coming home, I think, from a stint in the army. This is in Korea, so I think they have to do compulsory, a period of compulsory army service. So he comes back, finds out that his mother is dying. She had hidden it from him, not wanting to burden him. But he was also a really, really janky son to her. And remembering how janky he was to her, and now that she's dying at such a young age, I think she's only 50, it fills him with remorse and grief. So there's an emotional connection there. Do we necessarily, we can empathize or sympathize, one of the two, with his emotion, his grief, like he's crying, all that kind of stuff, of finding out that his mother is dying and there's nothing he can do about it, and then remembering and being remorseful and repentant, basically, of how he treated her. But now it looks like he's not going to have any chance to make it up to her. So it's like we can relate to those feelings, right? Then on the journey aspect of this, we see a mysterious supernatural character called the Lifespan Dealer gives him the option to sacrifice some years of his own life in order to basically save his mom, give his mom some of her life. And so basically the deal is that he will give 30 years of his life to his mother, and then the service fee basically is like 14 years. So he ends up taking off 44 years of his life altogether so that his mother can live. And what this does is it not only brings her back to life, but it causes her to look, it regresses her body age back to when she was 20. So she still has the mindset of a 50-year-old. She's still his 50-year-old mother, basically, but now she looks 20 and, has all of the memories and life experience that she had. And we see that she's also a really wonderful character. So we have a lot of goodwill towards the mom from what we see in snippets, I believe in the first chapter, maybe in the second chapter, of her being really loving and wonderful while her son is janky. So it's like we have this goodwill and emotional sort of response to the mother herself, as well as the son's remorse and grief. And now we're interested in the journey to see, okay, what are they going to do with this second chance? And now we get to see the son has a chance to make it right. And how is he going to do that? And how is his mom going to now relive her life? So very, very interesting. And it's really good so far. And so because I had some other ones in the list that I was, that I'm into, that I was going to perhaps use and analyze for this, but these are the ones that I decided to do. I recommend all of them. They are all really, really good. If you have any webtoon recommendations, because I am on that cycle. I'm back in the cycle of reading webtoons. I go in and out of like being really hardcore on reading a bunch of webtoons, and then I cycle all the way out and don't read for like a year. But I'm in right now. Okay. So if you have any webtoon recommendations, please let me know. But yeah, so the TLDR of this is create an emotional connection based on the circumstances that the main character is experiencing. And usually that emotional connection is going to be one that's strong based on a sense that the character is experiencing injustice or something sad, something like that. And it could be positive too. Let me know what other positive emotions would capture you for the character, or creating a sense of goodwill through character traits that we find admirable, like being hard, like we said for Fuki, being hardworking, being kind, being resourceful, things like that, or whatever other traits you want to give them, or giving the character a really, really cool skill or ability. And usually you're going to want to combine that really cool skill and ability with character traits that we like or that are interesting for the audience. Doesn't have to necessarily be that they're a great likable person. It could be that they have a great sense of humor or something else that's interesting about them, that would immediately capture the interest of the audience. And then number 3 is presenting a journey that's interesting. Even if we don't necessarily see a whole lot about what are the character traits that would make us be would endear us to the main character, or we maybe don't necessarily have a visceral emotional reaction to their circumstance, but the journey that you are basically telling us we're going to go on is interesting enough. And usually it's going to be a combination of all or a couple of these things for your opening chapter that will help to cause your audience to want to latch on to this character, hitch our wagon to your story, and go on the ride that you are promising us. Okay? So anyway, I hope that was helpful. If you have any other ideas about how we can go about getting our audience immediately interested in the character or the story, please definitely leave them down below. If there's enough additional suggestions, we can make another video. I can make another video about this, kind of talking about your suggestions. But that's just what I identified based on my own research. And so now I'm like, okay, now I can, have a better idea of how I'm going to use this when I'm writing. So anyway, listen, love you. Have a great rest of your day. All right. Have a great rest of your day, bestie, bro. All right. Let me look over here on this other screen so that I can leave you in a moment. Listen, love you. See you next time.